Good. Well, thank you very much for the very warm introduction, Professor Hartzog, and also to the organisers for inviting me to be part of this very special day in a very special part of the world. I wanted to start by looking particularly at a quote from the Global University Network of Innovation that I think is very important at this time. You see, it was written or published in 2017, but it was a call, an early call, I think, for universities to take up the challenge, one of the challenges of our times, around social inequality, poverty, environmental deterioration, immigration, global citizenship, peace, world, and a call for higher education institutions to really focus on different sorts of things, perhaps to what they had traditionally been thinking about in terms of internationalization, but also more generally. So I'm having trouble with, there we go. So here's the outline of the session. I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes, and I would hope that we can have some good questions afterwards. I'm really focusing today or tonight, tonight for me, today for you, on the maturity of the study of internationalizing the curriculum that has come a long way in the last decade. I'm going to look at some frameworks and models that people can use if they're interested in picking up this approach to, in fact, do as they would like to do in relation to creating a better world, what they would like, how they would like to contribute to that. I will be talking a little bit in the first instance about a recent scoping study that was published on the development of the field of internationalization of the curriculum. And I think this is important because we need to understand that this is a field of study. It has solid academic roots, and it is continuing to develop and should continue in the same way, with research and study and networking and partnering as an important part of that development. So it wasn't, it is a subset, of course, of the study of international higher education, which has increasingly been seen in recent years as being focused or having a very important part to play in improving the quality of education in what is a rapidly changing, increasingly interconnected, but also divided world. And that there was a lot of pressure for institutions to internationalize quickly. And that wasn't always done in the first instance, with a lot of thought and research behind it, but that has changed. Studies of international higher education were initially, in many instances, focused on mobility of students and staff, but that did vary slightly across regions. And so, for example, in the US, there was a lot of focus on development education, etc. But we are seeing now also in institutions, and we saw a lot of research on managing and teaching diverse communities of students as a result of the global movement of students. But what we see from this scoping study is that it was really around 1986 that the first document related to internationalization of the curriculum was published on this database. But it wasn't until 2011, and for the next decade, a massive amount of research was published compared with that whole period. So nearly 79% of the total research published from 1986 to 2021 was in that 10-year period. I have my own theories around why that was, but the interesting thing is that whilst 66% of it was from the global north, newly emergent countries from the global south had a voice in that time and found their voice, and that voice continues to be heard. We still have a path to tread in relation to publication in languages other than English, though. What that article recommends is, or highlights, is the most widely accepted and comprehensive definition of internationalisation of the curriculum. Does not mention mobility, but it does mention learning outcomes, assessment, content of the curriculum, pedagogy and teaching methods, and also support services. So it's a holistic definition, and it has a lot of space for interpretation. We're going to talk about how that space has been filled in part by some frameworks and models and work of giants who have done this work in institutions that are online now and that you'll be hearing from later. You're all part of that movement. So they also recommend it is time to have people move away from some of these more traditional forms of internationalisation of curriculum and broaden out. Thinking about how to maintain those perhaps, but also how to build on them and move into different sorts of work. Of course, we saw also changes in other areas and other literature in the internationalisation of higher education, with the redefinition of modification of Jane Knight and Hans de Witt's definition that many people used up until 2015, to one that includes the notion of all students, the global dimension, as well as the international and intercultural, and very importantly, that notion of universities making and internationalisation of higher education, making a meaningful contribution to society. This increased emphasis on the social responsibility of universities has taken on not just a local and international flavour, but also a global flavour. So we see people starting to write in the mid-2000s, right at the height of that explosion, I guess, of literature around internationalisation of the curriculum, a recognition of the need to create dynamic and sustainable global communities with particular understanding of human values and pursuing human values rather than simply material wealth through internationalisation. And this reflects the concerns with the recruitment of international students for revenue without there being a balance of other activities that address the sorts of issues we see on this slide. The higher education curriculum has increasingly been seen as a way to tackle these wicked problems that in a super complex world where sometimes it seems like there is no solution. And this has been argued to be possible through preparing graduates to be professionals and citizens in this super complex world. So this is where we sit in terms of the values that drive internationalisation of the curriculum in recent time. So we're seeing this important movement to thinking about all students, and that means mobility is important, of course, but how do we provide, if not an equivalent experience, one with equivalent learning outcomes for all students at home? And we see people starting to pick up themes that resonate with them as part of this focus on the internationalisation of higher education, the human values, and the power of the curriculum, the power of education. And we see here on this slide a reference to actually the tagline for Florida International University's strategy around global learning for all. So I'm pleased to know that those people are on the program later today. We start to see people talking about internationalisation of the curriculum at home in Europe, as at the same time as in Australia and Canada in particular, we were focusing on talking about internationalisation of the curriculum but also we see people thinking about not only what students will know, so not just the content and not just the preparation for the professional role that they'll take on, but who they will be as people, as human beings, and as serious actors with agency in a globalized world. Now, that's a big ask. We're looking at big picture questions here. We're looking at hard questions. We've recognized that they're super complex and that there may not be any easy solutions. And in fact, any situation can be read in very many different ways. We therefore need an agile curriculum, one that we can modify and adjust with thought and care, because this is an important function of higher education. So I define the curriculum in higher education. There have been very few studies on the curriculum actually in higher education. Most of the studies have been undertaken in the schools sector and sometimes in the professional education sector. But the curriculum in higher education as being the result of connecting teaching and learning in the formal curriculum, that is what happens in programs, in the co-curriculum or in the campus-based activities and programs that are run outside of the formal program but sometimes connected to them, and the meaningful education experiences that students have across their entire life cycle as to prepare them for life as professionals and citizens in this super complex world. Now, so I did some research in 2010, funded by the Australian government, to look at how academic staff in institutions in Australia, but also beyond. So it was an international project, although much of the funding and much of the work was done in Australia, that context matters. That people in different institutions with different priorities really looked at internationalizing the curriculum differently, but most of all, people in the disciplines had very different approaches. So people in health sciences, for example, were looking at internationalization primarily through often the development of student skills to work with patients from diverse backgrounds, to work in multilingual situations, perhaps where English wasn't the first language and they would need to communicate with people in different ways. But we've also found that the context of time, what is happening in the world at this time, what some of the situational obstacles and enablers are, what some of the economic situations and also the political environment is like, also have an influence on what people are thinking about in relation to how they might internationalize their curriculum. That's not to say they're thinking about it automatically, but if they're asked how to do it, where would they start? So this framework was designed to be used with faculty, with academic staff, to help them to start thinking about, given where their discipline is, what their discipline is, and the various layers of context, how they might plan their curriculum, thinking about the learning outcomes that they want to develop, how they'll assess those, and how they'll develop them as well. So what we see here is the process model. I'm going to skip through these quite quickly because they're all on my website with detailed instructions on how to use them. But basically, the thing to remember here is that this is a quality improvement model with an action research approach, but with the imagine phase here on the right-hand side of your screen being something slightly different. So you have to think about what you're doing and what sort of impact that's having, but also take time out to imagine something very different and new, thinking outside of those traditional paradigms of internationalization, but also the traditional paradigms within the discipline itself. And this is important because actually this whole process is one of learning and professional learning for academic staff. Academics and people who work in institutions are fortunate to have a whole range of different intellectual and physical resources that allow them to perhaps extend the boundaries of their own knowledge and practice. So the materials that are available on my website, they don't cost anything. You can grab them, you can use them, you can look at them yourself. But the idea is to work in a team, to get together a group of people who share a common purpose for internationalization of the curriculum, if not when they first meet, through discussion of what they see as those important local and global issues in both the related professions and the disciplines, but also what sort of people they want their graduates to be as they go out into the world as citizens of the local area, but also of the world. There are 5 things I think that we can do to move forward. And they really start with understanding the current state of what you're doing in your context. So this is a starting point. And really having conversations about, well, if it's not mobility, what is it? And if it is mobility and we've got a great mobility program or we've got a great virtual exchange program, but not everybody is involved in it, how can we bring some of those students' learning into the classroom for all students? And that might be a very simple solution for some. It might be those students who return from a mobility experience or who have been involved in a virtual exchange share their learning with students in the classroom who have not had that experience. So they get a benefit for sharing it, but also other students are encouraged to move into that space themselves. So engaging key actors and stakeholders and taking careful and strategic action is really important. I'm going to just finish with these 5 things that have worked in this process, as many people have written about their journeys in internationalizing the curriculum. Finding time for negotiation, discussion, debate, critique on the assumptions that we all have and that it's very difficult actually for us to identify. Making that space to imagine new possibilities and explore new ways of thinking about the world as we know it, and determining what this means for not just the formal and the informal curriculum, but what hidden messages are we sending to our students through whose knowledge counts in this curriculum, where the textbooks come from, and thinking about distributed leadership that is focused on problem solving and mutual inquiry around what does internationalization mean in this particular context right now, where context has all of those layers. And also bringing in diverse people, actors, agents to undertake this work, approaching it as purposeful. So that purpose, that rationale for internationalizing the curriculum is the starting point. Thinking of it as being context relevant at this particular time, and not just an add-on, but something that you can use as you're going through a regular process of 5-yearly course program design and review, maybe as part of your quality review processes. I think that what we've seen is the development of a new paradigm of internationalization of the curriculum that has these 3 main characteristics. Curriculum is a system of lots of different interconnecting parts, including the formal, informal, and hidden curriculum, but also learning outcomes, learning objectives, methodology, etc. That it challenges, it's a process. As a process, challenges dominant paradigms and challenges students to think differently as well, and has a goal of transformational learning at home for all students. If you want to know more, there are a number of places you can go. I've already mentioned my website. I do have an online workshop available that is self-paced and takes a couple of maybe 2 or 3 days to complete if you worked on it full time, or you could do it over 3 to 5 weeks if you wanted. And there are a wealth of resources online about communities of practice and how working together with people, not just from within your own program team, but more broadly across the world, as you're doing today, is a way of moving this agenda forward, not just for you, but for our global community of scholars, academics, teachers, and people who care about the world and making it a better place.
Wow, thank you so much, Professor Leask. This was really, really interesting and inspirational. I love the title that you came up with, Towards a Better World. I think this is a slogan to what we're doing here and what internationalization is all about in higher education, I guess. I would like to ask if there are any questions from the audience. You can unmute yourself and comment or ask. Also, feel free to write your insights, comments, ideas as we go in the chat and in the Q&A, and I will then address. Even if you have to go, we'll have something to begin our discussion with. I personally really, really enjoyed your idea of how us academics can expand boundaries of our own knowledge by entering the internationalization world. And not only that, so we have our own perspective, our own growth, personal growth, but also looking at our students and how they can make this world a better place. So it's a huge responsibility, but it's a huge opportunity as well. So I think this is how we need to approach this. Any questions? Because if not, I have a question.
And I've seen some questions around, can people have the slides? And yes, they can, of course. You would like to ask a question, another question, Eleanor, if there don't seem to be.
Yeah, I am really interested in the graph that you presented about the intersection of formal curriculum together with informal curriculum and hidden curriculum. So this is a new framework for me personally. So can you elaborate on or what is hidden curriculum? So I can kind of imagine what formal and informal mean, but the hidden curriculum is a new concept for me. So what is?
So I think it's the hidden messages I think of it as the hidden messages that we send without even knowing it. So we're often not even aware that in Australia, for example, in business programs, you'll often see textbooks from the US, rather than textbooks from Australia. Or if you're teaching a history program and you don't teach Indigenous history, you're only teaching European white history in a country that has a long tradition of Indigenous life and culture, then the hidden curriculum is that doesn't matter as much. We're privileging. When we make choices to select content, we make them without really always thinking about what is behind those and what message that is sending collectively. In the informal curriculum, I was shocked in one of my roles at the university was to organise international student orientation, and we required all international students to do intercultural competence training, but we didn't require domestic students to do that. When we investigated what the message was, domestic students really felt they had no responsibility to learn intercultural competence because they're coming here. And so they're going to have to learn to adapt to us. So we were sending the wrong message. This was the hidden curriculum. We were sending a message of they are coming to us, therefore they will adapt. Whereas what we needed to be doing was saying everyone needs to work together. Everyone is going to learn new things and become more interculturally competent by having this opportunity.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We have one more question. I guess we do have 2 minutes before the next part of the keynote from Anne. Would you like me to read it from the chat, Betty?
I can. Is it the one about global citizen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's maybe
so you read it. You read it. Yeah.
Okay. So I was wondering about the term citizen, preparing students for life as professionals and citizens. Is it connected to the intercultural citizenship concept of Michael Byrom?
Well, it could be. And in some places it is. But in other places it's not. So this is, I think, a matter of context. This, some people are very familiar with the Byrom model. Other people will pick up the OECD model of global competence framework and work with that. In some universities, they will get some scholarship going around what global citizenship means specifically for their students, what particular set of knowledge, skills, and values they want their students to have, and they will use that as their framework. So as if you were doing a PhD on a topic, you choose what your framework is going to be in teaching as well. It's just like you choose a textbook or you choose a model. And ideally you go to a model that has some research behind it, but then you might do some of your own so that you make it more contextually relevant.
Right. Thank you very much. We are going to move on then, and please keep your questions and insights and comments coming in the chat. We will get back to the discussion very, very soon again. We are continuing our session on the benefits of internationalization. We really want you all to think about how important and interesting and amazing this world is in terms of benefits of internationalization, because there are challenges, of course. You know, we could have done maybe a weekly session about the challenges. We want to focus on the benefits first to actually make you want to join this internationalization world. And Professor Petridis will be next, and from personal growth and empowering our students to become better prepared professionally and as citizens, we're moving on to more benefits. And Kostas, the floor is yours.
So thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is Kostas. I'm Yavan. I'm from Greece, from the Hellenic Mediterranean University in Crete. And what I'm going to present you is my personal experience and how totally, in todos, as they used to say in Spain, internationalization has shaped me as a person, as an educator, and as a researcher. And through my personal experience, I will show you how this has impacted my university. So thank you very much, Elena, for the opportunity, Sapir College for the organization. And I would like to highlight that I'm not a professor of internationalization. My research field is laser physics, but I have shaped, you know, this the impact of internationalization. It was played an important role. So congratulations, first of all, for this organization. You know, I'm encouraging all of you to stay until the end, because we have to learn a lot of things, and this is the meaning of internationalization, as very nicely Professor Betty Leask has revealed during her presentation. So this is the outline of my talk. So I will move on. I will move on very fast, because a lot of definitions about internationalization has been revealed through the previous speaker's talk. So for me, internationalization is a culture. It's not, of course, numbers support the implementation of this culture, but for me, it's a culture. And this is a challenge, but also an opportunity to transform your university totally, and make small universities like mine to be able to collaborate with the giants. And this is what I'm going to describe to you right now. For us, and for me personally as a teacher, internationalization is the best assessment tool. It's the best assessment tool regarding what I'm doing, how capable I am, what my university is doing regarding curricula,